Okay, today is December 9th, 2014, and we are interviewing William Baltazar at Chicago Public Library Clearing Branch. Mr. Baltazar was born April 29th, 1950. My name is Cheryl Walker, and I'll be the interviewer. Kristen Barnes will be the court reporter for the interview. Okay, William?
You can call me Bill.
Okay, Bill. Okay, first off, would you like to tell us where you were born?
I was born in Chicago, Cook County Hospital, and I was the youngest of 10.
The youngest of 10?
Yes. So
and
8 older brothers and 1 sister, and I was the 10th child.
How was that, being the baby?
I think I was pretty spoiled. So I had all these big brothers always to look after me, and when I would grow up, I realized that they really gave up a lot for me. And it was just maybe an extra pair of socks or an extra pair of whatever. So I didn't really feel too deprived of anything. And of course, my sister and I were always really close. And as we say, we were always with the 4 youngest ones. And that would be my sister, my brother Arthur, and my brother Anthony. So we kind of grew up a little bit at a different time because it was the older brothers and then the younger ones. So I always seemed to be a little bit closer to the younger ones, and my older brothers were really more of a father figure to me than my other brothers.
Can you tell us what your parents did?
My father, the best I can remember, I really didn't know my dad that well. He had an orchestra, and my mother was a stay-at-home mom.
And something that's unique about your family is how many of your brothers served in the military?
I have 4 older brothers who served. My brother Bob, and he was, if I'm correct, he was in the 50s. And my brother Eddie served in Germany. My brother Lawrence was in Vietnam in the early 60s, and I'm not really sure, but I think he went over early with the advisors. And my brother Arthur served in late 60s, and he was up in Pleiku, and I served in the 70s. It was also during Vietnam, but I didn't go overseas.
Okay, in what branch of service did you?
I was in the Army, and I went to school for what they call petroleum storage specialist. What that boiled down to is you're driving a fuel truck. However, after I got my orders, I was sent to the 498 medevac air ambulance. So I worked in an air hangar. Nothing that I went to school for. And so it was quite an experience. I was a little nervous at that time because I had all the medical insignias and really with no training. And they told me I would learn as I go. So it was a good duty.
Going back, what were you doing before you entered the service?
I had a full-time job working at Continental Can. I was 18 years old, and I worked second shift. I always worked, never stopped.
And were you drafted or did you enlist?
I was drafted.
Okay, so your MOS was to drive a
My MOS, what they call it, a petroleum storage field. So you worked in an oil field where they would distribute the oil, and you had a channel at different locations.
But you never worked in that field?
No. So when I got out, they sent me to the motor pool, and I'm certainly not a mechanic. And I hung around the hangar there, and I believe a new company came in, and they sent me over to the 498 medevac, and it was basically a crew that came back from Vietnam. And as they call them, the ships, they had all the helicopters there. And so they were still fly out. And I worked in aviation. And I ended up working in the hospital.
What did you do there?
Just a little administrative things there. And it was kind of interesting because, believe it or not, it was near the maternity ward. So it was really different. And I believe there was a section on base that families stayed and their husbands were in and of course a lot of these women were with children are going to have children, and so we would end up transporting them to the hospital. So it was a good duty. I spent a lot of time in the maternity ward.
Where did you take basic training?
I went to Fort Benning, Georgia, and the AIT, if I'm correct, it was in Virginia Beach. And from there I went to Georgia. And I felt actually pretty lucky because at that time everybody was going in and it was it was a difficult time. And in my company there was approximately 500 people in the unit, and everybody got shipped to Germany, and there was 3 of us. One went to Alaska and 2 of us went to Georgia, and everybody else went to Germany. And the rumor was back then was that when you went to Germany you went there for 6 months, and then from there you went to Nam. So somehow I kind of lucked out. I didn't kind of, I did luck out.
What was the highest rank that you achieved?
I was a Spec 4. So.
And why did you choose the Army?
Well, I didn't have a choice. I was drafted, and at that time they started a lottery, and I don't remember what my number was, but it was the very last number. So that's what it was, and I guess that didn't totally understand it then, but I understand it now, and that was your obligation, and that's what you need to do.
Do you recall your first days of service?
I did. For me, it was, I guess, like everybody, it was kind of a difficult time. It was actually the first time I was away from home, and you just felt this kind of insecurity of, where you're at, what you're doing, and in simple terms, that bottle of shampoo that's in your shower. Nobody really cares, so you just can't take things for granted. For once, you got to man up and do it on your own, and you got to think on your own and do what you need to do.
Did you fly to Georgia, or did you?
I flew.
Virginia.
I flew, yeah, and each time I flew.
What did you think when you got on post the first time?
Well, of course, the first time was in basic. And there was a lot of hype going on. They made sure that they let you know that they were in charge. So you were quick to, take the orders and do what you needed to do. And the way to survive is you did what was expected.
Was the Army the first time you ever spit-shined your boots?
I would say so. Yeah. I mean, we were pretty a neat and groomed family, so it wasn't, the biggest thing on my list to worry about.
Do you recall your instructors, any of your instructors?
Of course. There was Sergeant Brown and Sergeant Larimore. These were really tough drill sergeants. I really can't think of the other names, but I think if I seen them, I would recognize them today.
They were tough on you.
Yeah, and there was Sergeant Cicero. Yeah, well, that's what it was.
How did you adapt to military life, the food, the social life, the barracks, things like that?
For me, it took me a long time to adapt. I was used to being independent, thinking on my own. It was just a difficult time for me. It took me almost until I was ready to be out of the service. Once I got a regular job in a regular company, then it kind of broke the ice for me, where it was a little more comfortable, and they treated you a little different. They knew you had a job to do, you had a responsibility, you showed up and you did, and so it was turned more into a job than having an instructional day all day.
Is there anything that you won't eat today because of military life?
I do not go to buffet restaurants. Okay, you get in line, they put all your food, put it in a tray, and I'm a real picky eater to begin with, and I don't like them putting my ice cream dessert on top of my mashed potatoes. No, so I don't do that.
Did you ever have to do KP duty?
Yes, quite often. But I learned quickly being in there that I would volunteer to be one of the food service. By being one of the food service, then you've seen how they operated from behind, so you knew what to expect when all the other guys were coming in. So they let you eat whatever you wanted to eat.
So you were the ones that were slopping it on?
No, well, that was my first experience over there, but you had the whole kitchen staff behind you if you needed anything. I'll leave it at that.
What was the weather like in Georgia? Did you enjoy it? Did you miss?
For me, it was great weather. I mean, we're used to the Chicago weather, and in the worst days, you might get some snow, but by 2 o'clock, it's gone.
So you didn't miss that freezing cold?
No, I was well trained by then.
Okay. How did you communicate with your family and your friends?
Write letters. So I was, one of my sister-in-laws used to write to me every day. I would get either a card or just a few words or just encouragement, and the mail is really, really important. You come back and you go to your bunk and they left a letter for you. It meant everything to get that mail. And I know many guys who didn't get that mail, but it was really important to get that.
Living or being stationed in the States, could you make phone calls, or could they?
Yeah, they had, being in the States, they had a phone booth. You saved up your change. Once a month, you could have enough change to make a phone call.
Did you ever call collect?
I did a couple times to reverse the charges, but I didn't do that often. So it was either because I had to leave, to come home, and so I could call them when I was ready to leave. But it really didn't happen too often.
How many times did you take leave?
I think it was maybe twice.
And did you come home both times?
Yep.
Did you travel the area that you were stationed in?
I well, we were in Fort Benning, Georgia, and it's about 100 miles from Atlanta, and we did make a trip up there. And I went to the Carolinas. Of course, got to go to Pensacola Beach. Yeah, and spend time in Alabama, Tennessee. So, if you got a chance to get out, we didn't sit in the barracks. Got in somebody's car and we went somewhere.
Did you have a car?
At the end, I did. I had my favorite Volkswagen. So I came home to get my car, and at that time I was allowed to have a vehicle. Once you were in for a certain amount of time, they let you have a vehicle there. So I had it right at the end.
And you had a Volkswagen?
Yeah.
Was it convertible?
I wish it was, but no, it was a Volkswagen Bug.
Did you ever join any veterans organizations?
I did not. I just chose not to. However, towards the end, I did join VA. And I had a difficult time joining VA when I got out. I just felt that I was always self-employed, and I just kind of felt it was kind of a handout, and I didn't want that. I was always one who said, I'm going to figure it out, I'm going to do it myself. But the later years, they convinced me that I deserved it, I needed to join. It was probably one of the best things I did. I was overwhelmed when I went to the VA, and this is in Madison, Wisconsin, and I had an appointment to go for a physical, and when I pulled up, it was gated. The guard there opened the gate, and he asked where I was going, and I told my name, and he says, oh, we got a reserved parking space for you. And I was just floored. And when I went in, I asked, and one of there was a few guys sitting there, and they were volunteers, and I asked where this room was where I had to go, how do I get up there? And they says, oh, we'll take you there. And I said, no, just tell me where it's at. And they took me right up to the room, and everybody, thanked us for serving. It was really overwhelming. Even the professional staff, the doctors, the administrators, the people in there, they were all very gracious. So I was really proud to go there. So can't say enough about it. They went way over the top.
I don't know if I asked you this question, but do you stay in contact with any of your fellow veterans?
I actually keep in contact with two of them. One is Dave Gotkin. He actually lives in Burbank, Illinois. And I have a friend, Kevin Toole. He is out in California. And I just texted him over Veterans Day. Just told him I was thinking about him, and he called me right away. So after 40-something years, he's still keeping contact.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Do you ever go to any reunions?
I do not.
Okay, what have you done? What have you done since separating from the military?
Well, I went to a seminar once, and they started the seminar, and they said there's three kind of people in the world: the person who waits for something to happen, the person who goes out and makes something happen, and the person that doesn't know what the hell's happening. So who has a business for sale? And I realized back then that I never had a formal education, so I need to work a little bit harder than the next guy. So long story, but at the age of 22 years old, I opened up a restaurant. And a year after that, I opened up a clothing store. And clothing store wasn't doing that well, so I went to the library, and 6 months later, I started a company. I learned how to import and export from Hong Kong and Germany. I went to the Hong Kong consulate and the German consulate, and I started a company called Master Trade. And my passion was art. And I started, somewhere in between there, I found another ad in a local paper. I grew up in Brighton Park, and there was a bar for sale. So I went to go check it out. And by the time I left, I bought the bar. So I had the restaurant, clothing store, importing company, and a bar. And I ended up opening 2 art galleries, one in Downers Grove and one in Forest Park. So it was almost like having a real job.
Busy man.
Yeah.
Do you still own those businesses?
I do not. I got married when I was 31. And 6 months later, we adopted 2 kids. And it took me about 2 years to grow up and realize that you can't be in the bar business coming home at 5 o'clock in the morning with a family. So I packed up and sold everything. And I moved to Wisconsin Dells. And we opened up, my wife was kind of nervous, like, what are we going to do? And, you know, all I knew was about antiques and art. So I opened up an antique mall. 2 years later, I bought the building next door. And then about the 4th or 5th year, we put another addition on, so now we have 85 dealers. And 10 years ago, I started another company. And we manufacture these portable tabletop aluminum display cases. So after our 2 daughters got married, our youngest 2 daughters got married in last year, in October and in December. So I decided I had enough, and we sold everything. We just have the display case business now. So it's almost like having a real job, man.
Wow. While you were in the military service, did you carry anything around for good luck? Or
No, not really. But I was a guy who always had a camera. I was a self-taught photographer, and I always had a camera with me. In fact, when I was in the service, they had a program there, and I took a photography class. And so I started doing some of that. They would assign me to go wherever out in the field. It was usually some kind of party, and they had dignitaries coming in from wherever they're, I shouldn't say dignitaries, other officers from other countries coming in. So we would take photos. And because of the service, I learned how to process and develop film. And I started myself as a self-taught photographer, but when I found out what the program was, I went for them, and it was really beneficial to me, and I enjoyed it.
do you still do photography?
Not as much as I used to, but I still have a couple of the old cameras, and when I do take pictures, I still take them the old school way. So.
When you were with the hospital, and did you always have enough supplies, or was there a shortage of supplies because
Never.
of when it was?
Never. I've never experienced that. No.
Back when you were in the hospital, and you said you were in administration, those years in the 70s, that's when everything was clavicle cleaned. Did you have to do that?
No.
No?
No.
Okay. Not clavicle.
I was basically, when they were exiting out of the service, they had to go for a physical. So I was gathering whatever they had and take it from one office to the next office. You know, I really didn't have any experience in medical technology and what they were doing, but they had a job for me. And for me, I found it a little odd or indifferent, was because I was the lowest ranking guy in the company. We had a colonel for a CO, which I thought was kind of odd. And everybody was either a warrant officer, which they were a little bit more kickback, and everybody else was at least in E6. I was the only PFC in the company. So I'm not really sure why they stuck me there, but
They needed you.
I guess.
Do you recall the day your service ended?
I do. We would sit around, and some of the guys, as they say, they were short. They had a few days left. We would talk about the day and a half, because that day and a half seemed like a lifetime before you get to go. So that's one experience I never forgot.
Did any of you, were you the only one that was discharged at that time, or were there friends of yours that was discharged?
I was the only one at that time in my company, and the two other friends that I still communicate with, they were in another company. I got transferred out of that company, and it was kind of a difficult time, because I always remember that that's when Nixon, shortly after that, said they were going to end the war, and I just got discharged. And I remember, but what they didn't tell anybody in the States was that they're going to end the draft, and everybody was all excited about that, and the big commotion about that. But what they didn't tell you was they extended everybody who was still in the service after that date to 6 months to indefinite. So they weren't drafting anybody else, but those guys who were expected to go home in another 30 days, they couldn't go home. They got extended.
So were you extended?
No, I was just one of the guys who got out, and 2 weeks later, approximately 2 weeks later, they come out, and I remember Nixon on the radio saying that the war's over, we're ending the draft, and everybody was really excited about that and happy that that was going to be over, but they extended everybody else.
And what were your service dates?
You have to check on there. I think it was
November 9th,
That's when I went in.
1970?
Yeah.
And May 11th,
When I was released.
1970?
Yeah. No, and 1970 is when I went in, November 9th
Okay.
of 70.
Okay. What did you do? Did you immediately decide that you were going to open these businesses or go to this seminar?
I went back to work. I stayed home for maybe, I don't even know if I stayed home for a week. And I immediately went right back to work. And I knew that I was tired of getting laid off. But I did have the time. And my buddy that I grew up with, his dad owned a restaurant. And I asked him if I could work there in between getting laid off. So when you work in a restaurant, of course, you're bussing tables, mopping floors, and cooking. And I quickly realized that if I'm going to do this, I'm going to own my own place. And I wasn't afraid to ask people, and I was always really polite and ask them, well, how do you do this? And you know the process, how we could do this. And because, if I'm correct, Reagan was in office now, and he, Small Business Administration, was favoring vets for loans. So I went to, Small Business Administration. So I went to Small Business Administration, and I was asking how do you fill out the forms and how do you do this, and of course they didn't have enough equity. But there's a process that you go through, and one of them was they had a group that was called SCORE. It's a Service Corps of Retired Executives. So I went to the program, and I didn't even know how to figure my food cost or my cost of goods percentages and so on. So I did that, and then working in the restaurant, I got to know the purveyors, and again, I wasn't afraid to ask, how do you do this? And at that age, I really had a lot of energy, and there's so many people that will take you under their wing, and what you need to do is just show up and get there a little bit earlier. And if you're polite, there's so many people, there's so many programs that will help you if that's what you want to do. And of course, those programs aren't meant to live on, it's just to get you going. But I had enough support, and 2 years later, I was able to get a loan. And it worked.
How did your military experience affect your life?
I think that what it taught me is that there's too many things processed, over the big program. Is that it made me responsible for everything that you do. I don't like all of this, what I call it, sense of entitlement. I realize that parents keep families together, and that I just look at people, and there's like too many people on the Give Me program. You owe me because whatever, I call it whatever their excuse is. And yeah, there's certainly, we need those programs. There's a lot of people who need help. There's a lot of young mothers out there who need help and they need support. But and the Army is a good example with the VA. I mean, paying all your health benefits. So I almost kind of believe at some point, and maybe it's way out there, that one thing about the service, it will make a man out of you. And I think more people should, at the age of 18 or 19, they should have some program, and everybody needs to serve in some kind of capacity.
What message would you like to leave for future generations who will view this interview?
Well, it's pretty much just basically what I said. There's a lot of programs out there. There's a lot of people to help you, but you need to get on your own feet. It's like, do you want to read about it in a book, or do you want to live it? Okay. You could read all of the books you want. You could talk to all of the people, but until you hook up what I call the old timers, and you sit down with them and you have this world experience. Our daughters went to overseas for their education, and when they come back, it's about their credentials, and not necessarily the schoolwork, but their experience with it. They be on hand, and education is certainly the key. And there are so many programs in universities, in colleges, junior colleges, that offer programs for kids. And that's, photography, art, drafting. Sign them up. You got to keep them busy. The young people, it's all about support. It's all about hugs. And you just have to make them responsible.
Is there anything you feel like we haven't discussed or should be added to your interview?
I don't think so. I don't.
Okay. Well, at this time, I would like to thank you for giving me my freedom and for you serving our country. And I would also like to thank you for honoring me to be the one to interview you today.
Well, thank you for your time.